Hi, I'm Missy Edgman. I am the women's minister at First Colony Church of Christ, and I wanted to do a video about a difficult topic, abortion, because I think people are going to be talking about it a lot more now that it is no longer a federally protected service. And hopefully we'll be able to have some productive conversations. We really have not done a great job as a society about talking about this issue. It's just very, very sensitive. It's very emotionally charged, and it has become very political. A lot of people will say, well, I don't really want to get political. And actually, abortion hasn't always been a political issue. 5 of the 7 justices that signed the Roe v. Wade decision were actually assigned by Republican presidents. There's organizations like Democrats for Life. There are plenty of people who vote Republican who also believe that abortion should be legally protected. So it's really not something that is specific to any political party. But it is a moral issue, and we need to know what we believe on the issue, and we need to be able to talk about it without getting angry, actually. So I'm going to be using, in this talk, I'm going to be using information from a couple of books. One of them I have, this is called What to Say When. This is by Sean Carney and Steve Carlin. Sean Carney is the president of 40 Days for Life, an organization I think I highly respect. And then another one is called Tearing Us Apart by Ryan Anderson and Alexandra DeSanctis. And when I share statistics later, it'll mostly come from that book. I read that book as a Kindle version, which was a really great option because you can just click on the footnotes and then go straight to the link and go to read online. You could read some of the studies that they're referencing in the book because it's a very deeply researched book. And there's lots of stats in there for people to think about. So anytime, as Christians in particular, before we think about having a conversation like anything that's going to be a hot topic, we need to really set our minds correctly. And we need to deal with emotional conversations with grace and with truth. And there were 2 scriptures that came to my mind to kind of that would help us set our minds. And one of them is from the book of James, and it says, the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. If our goal is God's righteousness, is everything, if we want everything in us to be righteous, to want the right things, to think the right things, to respond the right way, then, and we know from the Bible that anger doesn't get that, it does not achieve that result, then really we need to know ahead of time and just set our minds that anger should not have any part in this kind of conversation, because it's not going to help people make righteous decisions. They're not going to know more righteousness just because somebody schools them in an argument and gets mad at them or something. But another scripture that came to my mind was from Proverbs, and it says, the righteous care for the needs of even their animals, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. So this is saying that, righteous people they're even good enough to care about the animals, but wicked people, and we all, in our own eyes, if we just do what seems right in our own eyes, we all are wicked people. We need help understanding what's not wicked, and even the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. We see this kind of thing where people think they're being compassionate, but they're actually doing something that is harmful to someone else. And I think that is, I think that's the case with this type of topic. Okay, and don't make assumptions about what people believe just because you live in the same neighborhood, or because you have the same political sign out in front of your yard, or just because you go to the same church. Do not assume what people believe about this issue. And when you start a conversation about abortion, one really good thing to do is ask a lot of good questions. So a list of questions that I'm hoping I'll be able to get it up on a slide here for you. I got from the What to Say When book. This isn't an exhaustive list of the questions that they have, but these are a few that I thought were helpful. And when you think about having this conversation, train yourself to talk like a Jeopardy contestant. Like everything needs to be a question. This is not a natural thing for us. We tend to have conversations like somebody tells us what they think and we tell them what we think and we kind of go back and forth. That would be a normal way and a completely fine way to have a conversation, unless it's something very, very charged like this. In the case of this, you just want to ask someone questions, and also asking questions of somebody, it's going to help you understand really how they think. It's going to help them clarify what they think. And it shows respect for people. You know, you really do want to know what they think. You're interested to hear what they have to say on this topic. Many well-intentioned people really never thought a lot about what abortion is. And I'm one of those people. You know, in my early adult years, I would have been one of those people who would have said, well, you know, I wouldn't get an abortion myself, but I wouldn't want to take that choice away from someone else. And I did not see this as being inconsistent. And I actually think a lot of people land there. And which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video, because if somebody had asked me questions like I'm going to propose that you ask here today, it would have really helped me. It would have helped me kind of think through, just ask questions, it would have helped me think through, what is it that I'm actually saying I believe here? So that would be people maybe who haven't really thought about it a lot, like I hadn't. Now, some people know exactly what it is, and they still are supporting. And so asking these questions will kind of, you know, they'll have to hear themselves defend it. They'll have to hear the words that they have to use to be able to defend that position. And also be prepared for the red herring. So a lot of times when people are in an uncomfortable conversation, what they will do to try to kind of get off the topic is they'll introduce other topics. And so be aware that that may happen. So people may suddenly introduce, well, what about capital punishment? Or what about, you know, our world is so, you know, you would want to bring somebody into the world that's overheating and overpopulated and all this kind of thing. Those are not abortion. Those may be important issues to talk about in a different conversation, but that's not a conversation about abortion. So don't let people kind of like, if it's starting to get where they're sort of like wanting to ask you more questions, don't let it get off topic. Keep it on the topic of abortion if you want to have a conversation with somebody and get them to think about the topic of abortion. Also, kind of on the other end of things, whatever someone's opinion of Planned Parenthood has nothing to do with the topic of abortion. So don't let yourself get off on the topic of, well, did you hear what they did, you know, when they were, you know, making money here or there. That doesn't actually bear on whether abortion is a morally justified decision or not. So keep yourself on topic and kind of reroute any conversation back onto the topic of abortion. So what kind of questions can you ask? You'll want to ask about 4 of these questions before, without offering any kind of, you know, opinion of your own. Like I said, think of like a Jeopardy contestant. You know, what is abortion? That's important to clarify what you're really talking about, because some people might be talking about, I had my first pregnancy was a miscarriage, and the baby's heart had stopped beating. It was very early in my pregnancy, and so I had what's called a D&C to remove the dead body of the baby and the rest of what was in my uterus at the time. That was not an abortion. The baby was already dead at that point. It was a very emotional thing, but it was not an abortion. So you want to clarify, you know, what is an abortion? What are we talking about when we're talking about abortion? And how do they actually do an abortion? That's not something people often want to describe or think about. Why do you support abortion? And if somebody is thinking like I used to think, they might say, well, I don't support abortion. I don't want to take that option away from somebody. But, you know, when it comes to laws in our land, we really can't have a foot in both camps very easily, you know, so you have to kind of clarify that. Why do you support abortion? You know, there may be some reasons they give. When are you comfortable with a baby being aborted? Is a very good follow-up question. If they have reasons that they would support abortion in certain circumstances, when are you comfortable with a baby being aborted? Does the value of a person change depending on whether their parents love them or not? Does everyone really deserve a chance at life? Or do you think that circumstances could change that? And this one, I didn't even want to add this in there. I gave this as a presentation, a live presentation first, and I have a slideshow. And this stat I didn't want to put in there because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm already talking about abortion, which is like, a hot enough topic. I don't want to get into race as well. But this is something, the more I thought about it, the more I thought this really may help clarify whether people think abortion is something that's good or not. So listen to this statistic. 33% of abortions are Black Americans, but Black people only are 13% of the American population. So do you think that's good or bad? Another question, do you think the actions of our parents make us any more or less valuable? So like I said, you'll want to ask about 4 of these questions before you would offer up anything about yourself. So I took a guess. I don't know if this is true or not, but if you had to guess what you think maybe would be the top 2 reasons people would say they think abortion should be a legally protected service, what do you think that would be? I wonder if it would be something like, I guessed that probably the number 1 would be a woman should have a right to control her body. But when you think about that as an answer, that's not something we actually do in other areas of our culture, of our society. The specific example I thought about was no smoking zones. So I live outside of Houston, and in the Houston Medical Center, you can't smoke in the hospital, and you can't even step right outside of the hospital to smoke. You have to go to these little painted off areas. They look so sad. The one I used to remember seeing was like in the median of a street. I mean, they had them way out there off to the side under, some bushes and stuff, and you could like smoke your cigarette in this sad little painted area. And the reason that they would have them basically quarantined to that area is you may choose to smoke. Nobody's telling you can't smoke, but you do not have a right to inflict your secondhand smoke on other people who have not chosen that, because we know that harms their health, and you do not have a right to cause harm to someone else. So, that's the thinking behind something like a smoking zone, which I think is actually a pretty good analogy when we're talking about abortion, because there are 2 bodies that we're talking about when we're talking about abortion, and we don't have a right in our lives walking about on this earth to make any decision we want with our body. And we shouldn't have the right to do that when it comes to an unborn child, an innocent life as well. And there's a very destructive underlying thought to that phrase, that a woman should have a right to control her own body when it comes to the issue of abortion. And, obviously this is a rhetorical question, but if you answer it out loud, I won't know it's a video. But if think about the answer to this question: who will never get pregnant, a man or a woman? And the answer, of course, is a man. So when someone is saying that a woman should have a right to control her own body, they're saying she should be able to behave like a man. She should be able to have sex and never, ever get pregnant, just like a man, if that's not what she wants. If she doesn't want to get pregnant, she shouldn't have to get pregnant, because it's better. This is the underlying philosophy that's in there. It is better to be like a man than to be like a woman. And that really is, when you think about this and you start to see it, you start to see it all over in our culture, in the way that women are depicted. I mean, that women need to be like men. Women need to be more like men in order to be equal or successful in life. Here are a couple of quotes from the book Tearing Us Apart that apply to this. Abortion allows men to view women as always sexually available without any marital commitment or promise of stability required, and it allows employers and society as a whole to treat the male body as the norm and female fertility as a problem to be solved rather than a reality to structure social relations around. I'm going to read that last bit again because it's going to come up again. Female fertility is treated as a problem to be solved rather than a reality to structure social relations around. I mean, that's right there. If we structured social relations around the fact that women are biologically created to have children, there would be a lot that would change. And we haven't gone that direction in our culture. We haven't decided to make room for women's biology. Instead, we've tried to bend women's biology to be more like men. And it's destructive. Pro-choice activists, this is another quote, reject the bodily nature of women and use abortion to pretend that their bodies can function like those of men. And the thing is that it does not serve women well. It doesn't serve us well socially. It doesn't serve us well physically. It doesn't serve us well emotionally. Another major answer you may get, it's become more popularized these days about why somebody would support abortion, is they would say, well, it's women's health care. It's basic health care, they would say. So the Merriam-Webster Dictionary definition of health care: efforts made to maintain or restore physical, mental, or emotional well-being, especially by trained and licensed professionals. So you remember that quote I just said about treating women's fertility as a problem to be solved? Well, that's what you're saying when you're saying that abortion is healthcare, because being pregnant is a healthy, natural result of having sex for a healthy woman, of childbearing years. You know, that's a healthy, natural result. So to treat it like, oh, well, we need to restore her physical, mental, or emotional, you know, her well-being now. Like her well-being has been disrupted. Well, no, it's not. Her well-being hasn't, she's actually working like she's supposed to work. So that's what we're doing again when we treat when we treat an abortion as if it's healthcare. We're basically saying that women need to be more like men. Female fertility is a problem. It's a problem, and we need to kind of erase it. As of June 2022 in California, these were the restrictions on abortion at that time in the state of California. An abortion may be performed at or after viability only if the patient's life or health is in danger. So that sounds good, right? Because nobody wants, again, we're not lacking compassion. Nobody wants a mother's life or health to be in danger. People aren't, you know, monsters. So I looked it up. I Googled it. I thought, well, what does that mean? What is it? Are there medically necessary abortions? And you'll get one group on the one side saying there are never medically necessary abortions. It's just not a thing. That's just propaganda. And then you'll get the other side saying, oh yeah, no, there are medically necessary abortions. There was, you know, I looked it up and there was some gynecological organization. Yes, there are medically necessary abortions, they said. But they didn't list like under what circumstances. And I was curious to know, well, what circumstances would warrant this? So I looked, you know, a little bit further down in my search results, and I was noticing that the most common one was when a woman's amniotic sac ruptures before 20 weeks of pregnancy. That was the most common reason that I found that people were giving for medically necessary abortions. So what I did instead then was I looked up that condition of like a amniotic sac rupture before 20 weeks. And it was interesting because I still found the group who said, well, this is an instance that it would be a medically necessary abortion. But then listen to this. I found a doctor's group that was saying, if this happens to you, if you're pregnant and this happens to you, then we will treat the mother with antibiotics because, of course, the amniotic sac is now open and there's a risk of infection. So we're going to treat the mother with antibiotics. We're going to administer steroids in order to develop the baby's lungs so that it will be able to get a chance to breathe better when it's born. Try to keep the labor from happening. So they're going to put the mom on bed rest. If she does go into preterm labor, they will treat the baby and the mother. Now, the fact is, if the baby's born before 20 weeks, it probably will not survive, but it may. And that's healthcare. That's healthcare. That is actually healthcare. That's trying to maintain the natural process as long as they can, and then try to help the baby survive it if they can. So it's a really completely different mentality than abortion. And so back to the California interpretation of when an abortion would be when there would be restrictions, it says there were only restrictions if the patient's life or health is endangered. So her health may even be her mental health, like if she doesn't want to be pregnant. So, you know, the way we interpret these things, it really is going to be very, very different depending on what your mindset is about the desire of the pregnancy. So it goes back to the moral issue of, is this a moral thing to end the life of end an innocent life just because it's something you don't want, even if it's not medically endangering anyone? Here are some things that happen physically to women who have abortions. Preterm labor goes up 35%. Chance of preterm labor in a future pregnancy goes up 35% after only one abortion. It goes up 90% after 2 abortions. There was a friend of mine where I used to live. She was such a wonderful woman, and she had been sexually abused when she was young, and kind of predictable behavior. She ended up being quite promiscuous as she was older. She tells this story about her own life. She got pregnant, I think, more than once. I think she had more than one abortion. And she became a Christian later in her life. She became a Christian when she was in her 20s, and she and her husband went on to be missionaries in Africa. And she had their first child there, but he was born early, preterm labor. And because of the medical facilities there, the baby did not survive. And so that was really tough. But she didn't know. She didn't know what she was doing. She wasn't in a position where she was choosing an abortion, you know, out of a sense of controlling, you know, trying to take charge of her own life, out of some sense of good. She didn't know she was putting her body at risk. She didn't know she was putting her future children's lives at risk because of preterm labor. This woman went on to be an amazing counselor at pregnancy resource centers, and she was quite a person to know. Chemical abortions. Chemical abortions are the most popular abortions now. What these are, mostly because, you know, you can just get them over the telephone. You can go on Teladoc and get the pills to do a chemical abortion. These are supposed to be done before 10 weeks of pregnancy, which is very hard. How can you know if you're at 10 weeks of pregnancy or less over the telephone? People will be taking the pills. They take pills to stop producing enough progesterone to sustain the pregnancy first. And then they take another set of pills to actually cause your uterus to contract and get rid of the baby. But chemical abortions now, recent studies showed that hospitalization rates for complications from chemical abortions are twice that of surgical abortions. So when we're talking about, you know, abortion being health care, besides the fact that it's treating a natural fertility cycle as if it's a problem, it's also doing some damage. The physical act of getting an abortion is damaging to a woman's body. But then there's also damage mentally. So mental health, here's some statistics. This is from a mental health meta-study. So it's a study of studies. They've compiled several studies together. This was done in 2011, so it's not real up to date, but post-abortive women are 81% higher. They have an 81% higher risk of mental health problems compared with women who have not had an abortion, even after they've controlled for prior psychiatric health problems. It showed a rise in anxiety by 34%. There was a rise in depression by up to 37%. Alcohol abuse and suicidal behaviors were up by over 100%, which means that, let's just say 20 out of 100 women had alcohol abuse and suicidal behaviors before the abortion. Well, now more than 40 out of those 100 are going to have those same problems. So that's what it means to be up by over 100%. Marijuana abuse was up by over 200%. So it's really kind of hard to argue that abortion is something that's good for women's health care. So when you've asked plenty of questions and you've heard what they've had to say, you'll want to be clear about your own stand. I hope if you weren't clear about your own stand before, you've become more clear by thinking through these questions. But, you know, people used to say, well, I believe that life starts at conception. Well, we don't believe it. It's a fact now. Science has advanced to the point where we know that as soon as the egg is fertilized by a sperm, cells start to multiply. and those cells are becoming a life. When I was pregnant with my second child, I had a dream that I had kittens, and I was really upset in the dream because I wanted a baby. I thought, I already have a cat. I wanted a human. I wanted a baby. And it's kind of funny because people don't have cats. They have humans. So that's exactly what's forming from the very earliest moments of conception inside of a pregnant woman is a human. So human life begins at conception, and human life is valuable and worthy to be protected. And none of this would matter if life weren't good. If this were just some hopeless, awful place to be, what would we care? It's almost like a blessing to not be born in that case. But there is hope. There's always hope. And life is full of beauty. And life is good. And everyone deserves a chance to live life. So, I would have benefited earlier in my life if someone had asked me these questions, these clarifying questions. So I hope that if you need a clarification, I hope this did it for you. And I hope you feel equipped to have some conversations with people in your life who may need that kind of encouragement as well. Thank you.